We are here with Lacie Kegley, and I'm really excited. I'm excited to hear what God's been teaching you and all that. But why don't you introduce yourself? Because I don't feel like our whole Fit crew.
Sure.
A lot of them haven't met you.
Yeah, so Lacie, I have 6 kids, and 1 is a grown-up, so 5 are still at home that I'm raising, and I'm a single mom, and primarily I homeschool kids, but I also have a lot of, I could call them side hustles, but there are a lot of other hats to wear, a lot of other jobs. I have 2 websites that I run and maintain, and I write for those, and that's kind of, that's really it in a nutshell. I mean, those are big things, but sums up shortly.
Yeah. Well, share what you, your website. Is it Travelers Rest?
Travelers Rest here,
Okay.
Which is all for Travelers Rest. I mean, it's just like telling the stories of the people, the places of TR. So it's kind of a tourism website about the town and for the town. And then I have a personal blog called So Every Day that I've been writing for ever, back when blogs were just an idea. And my friend was like, oh, I never get to see you, I live in a different state, it'd be fun to see what your kids are doing, so let's create a blog together. And then it just kind of morphed into something else over the years. I think it's been like 15 years I've been writing that thing. A long time.
It is a long time. I did not realize.
Yeah, they were just baby blogs, like you had to have one called like blogspot.com or something, now you don't, but yeah, it's a long time. Yeah.
They're really good. I mean, when you share them, the ones I've seen are just like, they're so powerful. I really enjoy. You have a gift writing, so
thank you.
Keep doing it. And you wrote for us, which I'm so thankful for. I was like, oh, this is so nice for our Teen Awaken. All right, so we are in this series, Wilderness, and that looks differently and with a lot of people. So when you hear the word wilderness, what comes to your mind? Like, what do you think of?
That's a good question. Sometimes I think of wilderness and lonely, as a word that's associated with it to me sometimes. And even sort of lost, like something you have to get through to the other side, like a place maybe you don't want to stay. And those are some of the first things I think about of wilderness, kind of being alone and wanting to not stay there forever, not wanting to live in a wilderness. And even sort of a neediness sometimes I feel like is associated with that word too.
Yeah. When I was looking it up, because the way I was being a wilderness was biblically, spiritually, was not the correct view. But when people describe the wilderness, even what you're saying is true. It does feel like a lonely, isolated, is this ever going to end, time of your life. So are you currently in a wilderness season or in the past? Like, and if so, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. It's funny. I do think it kind of comes and goes. And it's funny because the actual wilderness I really like. Like when I think of biblical wilderness, I almost think more like desert. And when I think of like real wilderness, like actual woods, I feel like that's kind of life-giving. So I feel like they're almost juxtaposed. Like they're really different. And I'd like to be in one, like the life-giving one. But I feel like I've definitely been in the other. And I do think they come in seasons. I don't feel that I am, thank the Lord, I'm currently in such a wilderness as I have been in. But I still think, I have 3 teenagers, and that's a new sort of wilderness that I think I was a little bit, a little unexpected, like a little unprepared for, of it being a wilderness. I grew up with all brothers, and it actually didn't even plan to have such a large family, but then through birth and adoption, and it ended up with a really large family, and love it, but I'm not necessarily a newborn person, so I really was looking forward to the teenage years. And they have been fun, but they've been more difficult than I thought they would be also in certain ways. So in some ways, yes, that's a wilderness now. I'd say the wilderness that I've come through, sometimes life gives you an opportunity to compare things. And so when you've been through one wilderness, things don't look they look different. When you've been through something, a crisis or something traumatic, the next thing doesn't look as bad, even though it maybe still is not okay, but because this was so bad, you're like, well, this isn't as bad as that. This was like a fire, and this is just, it's okay. So I say the wilderness that I have been through was divorce, for sure. I mean, it's honestly, it's crazy to sit here at your kitchen table and say, yep, that's what I went through. Because when you're living it, like it was devastating.
Yeah.
Like there aren't even enough words to sort of be like, oh, this is so terrible. And then you put it past, and my personality is sort of like, okay, well, I would love to not revisit any of that again, like the pain, the memories. But at the same time, I know from experience, God has placed so many women, sadly, in my life who've gone through the same thing. And so I've had to revisit that in a lot of ways often. And I don't hate it, revisiting it, because I do think there's another side, and I'm grateful to share that other side. But like there's a part of me, like, once I've been through the wilderness, I'm like, well, I would like to just move on. I would like that not to be true. But it was really, really devastating. I mean, there were, I feel like, I would say chunks, like larger than I'd love to admit, chunks of my life that I can't even remember, because they were so, it was just, take the next breath. Not even like think of the, like, people say like live day to day. It was minute by minute. Like the next thing, someone would tell me you should put this fork of food in your mouth. Oh, okay, I'll do that. So it was just dark. I mean, and I would say that was for sure a wilderness. And it in the beginning, it was very deep and dark, and it lingered on for a long time. I mean, I think until you're out of it and you look back and like, oh, that took a large part of my life. Like that took a big portion of my life to get through this wilderness. I probably strayed from the question some, but so I would say that the divorce was a huge part of the wilderness, living and coming out of that. I think the thing too with the wilderness is once you've been in it, if we were going to associate wilderness with crisis, once you've been through it, like you're not the same person, for better or for worse. I mean, there are ways that God's kindness has shaped me into, I hope, a much better human than I was pre-divorce. And I'm grateful, but I can't say anything's been the same. There's like clearly a before and after, and I think wildernesses do that. They're like, here's where I was before, here's who I was before, and here's who I am after. Yeah. And it's pretty divisive in your life, or maybe not divisive, it's not the right word, but it's a clear, definitive point of here's this and here's that. I think I strayed from your question.
No, you're right. No, I think just what you said will resonate with a lot of people, because I think, a lot of us, are just in the season of a wilderness, and the enemy comes in like, am I alone? Like, do I really need someone to tell me eat? Or, this is, so you're just giving permission for people like, no, this is a wilderness. This is hard, and I get it, and no, that's great. So how would you say, if you don't mind me asking, how you're different coming out? Like, what did God teach you?
I think, unfortunately, some of the things always sound like cliches, but they're just true. I think, one, I definitely am a more sympathetic person or empathetic person. Like, I think that something about crisis makes you realize that that everyone has something, and I think I really liked categories before, like, okay, well, this is right and this is wrong, this is black and this is white, and I'm not really comfortable with gray areas. Like, I like things like I can make quick decisions and feel good about it, and there's nothing quick about these decisions, and there was nothing, there were some black and white things, but there was a lot of gray and so I think it's made me a more gracious person. So instead of looking at a person and thinking like, why did you do this, or you should have done it this way, or whatever, I can just think, you know what, there's probably so much going on that I don't know about you. There's so much that makes up who you are or why you made that one choice right then. And so I hope that I can look at people as a whole, but especially my friends and people I'm in community with, and say, like, there's a bigger picture here. There's more than just this thing you did or this thing you said. There's all this underneath. And just a reminder, too, that, like, there is no perfect. We live in a world that's super saturated with really lovely images. On your phone in your hand is a way of escape. And I spend a lot of time being like, oh, I can still struggle with it, but like that marriage is, on point. They're doing great. Or this mom is fantastic. My wife doesn't mind. Why don't my curtains ever match anything, or whatever it is, like whatever problem I have. Like, it's not true. Like, none of it's true. Like they might have lovely curtains or a great marriage in this season for this time, but there's always more to any picture. And so I hope it's made me a more gracious person. I think it's made my kids more gracious, more aware of like, oh, we just don't know why. Maybe that person's kind of being a punk because at home this terrible thing has happened, and this is just a place where they take this out. And so I think we've been able to sort of look at people just with, I think, more love and more grace to ourselves. I mean, I'm always telling my kids, and I need to preach it to myself, of like, you know, the words you talk to yourself really matter. Like, you know, I think we all do this, but I have a couple kids who will always kind of beat themselves up, like, oh, I can't do this, and you know, I ask them often, like, would you talk to and I'll ask them my friend's name, like, would you talk to Jen that way? Would you say that to her face? Like, no, why would I say that to her? Like, why would you say it to you? And so I think I hope it can turn us into, I think, kinder, better humans, but at least more gracious people who say, okay, there's a bigger picture happening here. And the other thing that I think it's made me realize is, so then I have 4 daughters, and you know, emotions are hard. Humanity's hard. Being a person is hard.
Yes.
Relationships are hard, and I really want them to be easy, and they're just not. Yeah. Something I tell them a lot when they have these big feelings. You know, I feel like I'm always like saying there's these 3 things. You know, and one, like, you're normal. Like, you're not the only person to feel this way. And I think that was really helpful to me too. That to meet other people, like, oh, I'm not the only person. And it made me sad to find out there were so many people who had struggled in the same areas. But you know, you're normal. And then another thing that especially when I meet women in crisis, you know, I always want to tell them, like you won't always feel this way. I'm always telling my girls that, like the way you feel right now is really true, but you won't always feel that way. You won't always be sad, or you won't always be angry. Like, you won't always feel like, you know, all your jeans don't fit. Like that, you won't always feel that way. And I always finish up saying, and I love you, you know, like I'm here. But I think that's been a thing I've realized. Like, you're not, even in what feels like death, you know, death to a marriage, death to a relationship, death to a plan I had for my life, you know, the view I had, like, even in that, I won't always feel that sad, you know, and it doesn't feel true. Like, when you're in the darkest part of the wilderness, you really, really believe you'll never see another side. Like, you think you'll never reach sunlight again, and you think that's true. You really believe it, and I think it's really good to have people who say, there is another side. You won't always be sad. Yeah. I think it's a big deal, and we need to be reminded, because sometimes we think, well, I'll always feel this way. It will always be terrible.
Yeah. That's really cool that you speak that to your girls, and I mean, I think that it's powerful for me. It just is seen like really prophetic, like that's what the Lord is saying to us. Like, the wilderness is not our whole entire life, although it may feel like it. You know, and you think of the Israelites in the wilderness, like 40 years. I'm like, oh my word, I'm almost 40. I got 1 more year. I'm like, oh yeah, that's my life, you know. Yeah. And it does seem forever, but that's really cool. I like the truth that you give them into yourself, and just a reminder, because it's true. I mean, I even think, like, you know, motherhood. Remember when they were first born, and you're just like, will this ever end? These sleepless nights. Like, someone tell me there's light at the end of the tunnel. I cannot do this. Yes. But yeah, I love it. So that really is something you could share, or maybe you are currently sharing with women in crisis. What is something else that, like, maybe someone's watching right now and their spouse just walked out the door. What would you say?
Yeah.
Like, what was helpful? This is what I did with the last girl. Yeah. What not to say? What to say? I'm sure you've heard, and this will help me too when something happens.
Yes.
No, I'm always like, did I say the right thing?
I think honestly, less is always more. Like, I mean, you don't say that. Like, literally, less is more. Like, I think being alive and quiet beside a person. I could just list names of dear friends who, like, didn't have any words and they just sat there. That was huge, because I couldn't remember anything they said half the time anyway, and just being alive beside me, like, that presence and not feeling literally physically alone was really powerful. I really also really liked the friends who just did stuff without asking. I know I've done it too, so I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I decided to do the wrong thing. Like, I think in the end, unless you say crazy stuff, you can't do the wrong thing in one sense. Like, you're like even the friends who said stuff, I was sort of like, I knew they were there. I knew they were there out of love. I knew they were there out of compassion. And so it wasn't like I thought, like, oh, that was a crazy thing, why they said. So being there is enough. I don't think you have to beat yourself up over is the right thing to say or not. But, you know, it didn't help. You know, things like, God will never give you more than you can handle. It just felt like garbage. Like, that just felt like it didn't help me at all. because he was giving it to me, and I felt like, I mean, I was, like, and I don't even know that I think that's, theologically accurate anyway.
Right.
But it wasn't helpful at the time ever. And honestly, even like, well, I had some friends who would text some Bible verses, and that was good, but honestly, and not bad. But and songs were really helpful, like sending links to songs, or things like that were helpful. But really, a lot of talk wasn't helpful. I mean, a lot of things like, nothing like, you'll be better off, or like words like that, or like, even if they maybe were true, they feel awful at the time. So I can't think of a particular thing people said that was terrible. But I think more than just particular words showing up. But like I said, I loved friends who just came and did stuff. Like, and didn't ask me, like, hey, like the question, what can I do to help you? Like, I don't know. I don't even know.
That just seems like more work for you.
Yes, exactly. But I love the friends who, even though it felt kind of pushy, and sometimes I honestly wish they weren't there, because I just wanted to curl up in a ball and disappear. But the friends who just came and said, I'm coming by at 2, I'm going to clean your house for half an hour, and I'm going to bring you dinner. And it just said it, and I'd be like, I sort of sometimes didn't want them to come, but I really appreciate them just doing it, just doing the thing, not asking, do you need this? Just saying, like, I'm going to come do this. It was, and that was huge. Just, it kept me going. I love to tell those stories because they're stories of Jesus working. I remember one friend who came, and I wouldn't even thought of this, bought new sheets for every bed in our house. Wow. And it was just like a really simple thing that probably actually was expensive because there's a lot of beds in my house. And I would never thought of it. Yeah. And, and it was so nice, something just sort of life-giving and humanizing, like, oh, these are fresh sheets, and someone thought, like, it was really kind. And I wouldn't have thought, oh, I need fresh sheets for my house.
Yeah.
But just really practical things were really helpful. And food was great. Not having to think about feeding my kids, taking care of my kids, that was huge. Like, I'm going to come and take your kids, I'm going to take them to a movie, and I want you just to stay home alone. Okay, thank you. And honestly, even sometimes being told what to do. I'm a person who actually has a plan and likes to do it. But something about crisis makes you frozen, And so honestly, it was helpful for people to say, I'm going to do this.
Okay. And
you need to spend an hour alone at this coffee shop, or you need to, and I'd be like, okay, I'll go do it.
That's so helpful, because sometimes, like, when I've walked alongside of friends going through stuff, I'll reach out, but I'm very hesitant to do stuff like that because I'm like, oh, is that too much? But I think of if I were in those shoes, like what you're saying, like just someone, like, no, this is what I'm getting the kids, like, go take a nap or go out and get coffee, like that. That's super helpful because I can be bossy.
Yeah, and people are afraid to be bossy, and I think people are afraid to. Yeah, but sometimes bossy is really helpful, And taking the kids was a big thing. I think especially if you have women in crisis and you can take their kids away because you're making 100 decisions you never thought you had to make. Like, for example, in divorce, you're making decisions like, oh, I need to find a lawyer. I need to think about custody. Like these words that were foreign, you never gave any thought to them. You didn't want to, and now you've got to make decisions in a moment of crisis that's going to affect 10 years from now, and no one has clarity for that, so it's very overwhelming. And so then the thought of someone, even on a good day as a mom, your kid saying, what's for dinner, Mom? It's like,
it's exhausting.
Yes. Yeah. So on a bad day, it's like a trigger that could, make something explode. And so to have someone come in and just say, I'll take your kids. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Like, great. Thank you. But I do think more action, less words, because really so many of the words I couldn't hear. I just couldn't, I just wasn't there to process. Yeah. And I think one thing I always tell women too is just like, it's so simple, but literally just breathe. Like, it's not your job to figure out next week. You just breathe in, breathe out. Next moment. But I think I would come back and say, like, more action, less talk would probably be helpful.
That's good. The girl that I interviewed before, same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just being there, being present. And so that's really cool to hear that from you too. So, well, that's all I have. Do you have anything you want to add? Good.
Yeah, I think that, I would also just want to encourage people, like, there is such truth, like, so the wilderness of divorce, death, crisis, whatever it is really dark, and then there's hope over here. And I think that sort of, I wouldn't call this a wilderness, but there's these verses of promise, like in the Bible talking about restoring the years the locusts have eaten and things like that. And I think that's its own sort of I wouldn't even call it wilderness, but another side, because now I sort of feel like, okay, I've had this, now I'm ready for the restoration part, you know.
Yeah.
But sometimes while you're waiting for that next thing, it still feels a little like a wilderness. Like, okay, what's the good that's going to come out of all this? And sometimes it isn't quick enough or tangible enough, but I'm hopeful that there is a good, you know, and there is another side. And I think we're all, you know, whether you've gone through crisis or not, we're all wanting, you know, the years to matter, the stuff that we endure to have a purpose and a point, you know, and sometimes we don't get to see it, and sometimes we get little trickles of like, oh, that's how that played out, and that's how that played out, and so I think it's God's kindness that years later you can look back and see, you know, these things that work together to honor Him and to make some of that wilderness no less painful, but maybe valuable.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Thanks for coming
Thanks.
and doing a video.
Yeah, yes, that I thought was a podcast.
Yes, that was a podcast.
Yes. Yes. I would have maybe worn mascara. That's all I do.
Well, Instagram. We'll put a filter
Can
on
you
it.
pull up and
Yeah, the lashes.
That's what I want. I demand it.
There you go. Oh, man, thank you